Hi guys, thank you so much for joining us today. So today we have a very special project. We have a video with people who are working with IndieCup about a game which is called Shores Unknown. Uh, could you please introduce yourself and tell me about one particular question that I have? How come one of you is in Japan and the other one is in Ukraine? How did this happen, and how do you guys find yourself? How do you manage to work together?
Okay, so I think I'll start. Hi, Kirill. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about Shores Unknown and IndieCup. Shores Unknown is a very exciting title that I'm really curious to learn more about from Ilya, who works from Japan. IndieCup is an online-only event held twice per year. We're basically like a crossover between a games festival and something like Oscars, so an awards show. Twice a year, we invite developers from Eastern Europe to participate and join the competition to win awards in several different categories. Developers Berlin participated in the 2019 competition, becoming the best Unreal Engine game, which is historically one of our most competitive and crowded nominations. That's when I first heard about them, and really interested to talk more about this game.
My name is Ilya. I'm the lead developer of Shores Unknown, and thank you, Kirill, for inviting us. It's a great opportunity for us to talk about the game and the
Yeah, thank
project
you
we're
for
in.
joining. So, tell us a little bit about your team. So, you said that you were basically working around the globe. You have 3 time zones. How many people do you have? How did you guys kind of start this project? What were like the main things that push you into the development? Very
Right.
interesting to learn how it all started.
Yeah, the project began with me in 2017 when I was working at Q Games here in I'm in Osaka right now, actually, but I was in Kyoto, Japan back then. And at some point, I just wanted to start, learning Unreal Engine 4, just to improve the skills and so on. So I started prototyping. I had some ideas that I wanted to try. I had a few favorite games of mine that I wanted to, try to emulate, imitate, and so on. Uh, at that point, that was just purely a hobby thing. And I also had a friend in Russia. I'm originally from Russia myself, from Moscow, and I moved to Japan in 2016 to work here in the game industry. Um, so, in my Russian friend and also my ex-colleague from Moscow, who was working as a level designer back then. So basically, I had this idea of a prototype of a battle system that I wanted to try, and he wanted to work on his Unreal Engine 4 level design portfolio, basically. So we started collaborating, and at some point, after a few months of development, when we had a working prototype of the combat system and basically one level made, which later actually became the first level that you see in the game in the early access right now, the village level. It's still there, but it has seen some major changes since its inception. Anyway, so another person who joined us was another friend of mine, also from Russia, who became the scenario writer of the game. And that was where we decided to kind of, try to push it a bit further, make it a bigger project, not just focusing on the combat system, but also try to come up with the story, some narrative plot, and so on. So, and it started kind of becoming an actual RPG title. And then on New Year 2018, we released our first playable prototype to the public on Game Jolt and IndieDB. It was a downloadable demo that less than 1 GB was completable in 30 minutes or so. Included a couple of combat scenarios and some story. And people liked it. Players liked it. Players started giving us feedback. We got noticed by Game Jolt owners who offered us a feature slot on Game Jolt. And then it kind of started improving from there. We started our game Twitter. We got noticed by a few publishers actually, and We were actually really surprised because it was a hobby project at that point. We weren't really planning to monetize it or sell it or anything. And then all of those offers from publishers, hey, do it, we want to publish your game. This project looks really interesting, and so on, started coming our way.
Can you tell who were like the main publishers that approached you in the beginning? Who signed you up like finally?
HitSense is the publisher that we ended up working with. I'm afraid I won't be able to immediately
That's
tell
fine.
the other
No,
names. Yeah,
don't worry.
there were a few. Anyway, but yeah, we signed up with HitSense in the end in summer 2018. This kind of became, an actual commercial project that we decided to start developing. Well, in a full-time capacity. Like the team still stayed very small. Right now, the core game team is only 5 people. So me, the level designer, the scenario writer, the composer, and another game designer who joined us about half a year ago.
I think that the whole team, including outsources, is 14 people right now.
Yeah, we have about a dozen outsourcers that we worked
Right.
with throughout the duration of the project, and we still have some outsourcers who are helping us. Though most of the outsourcing workload is close to finished by now. Like most of the modeling is done.
So, and what are the tasks that you're usually outsourcing to like third parties?
Art and 2D and 3D art really, and also we have 2 outsourcers in Britain in Great Britain who actually are helping us with the scenario, and they have been a very big help with actually getting the game to feel natural for English speakers, because we're all Russian in the team originally, and regardless of how good we are at, I guess, speaking it, that doesn't mean that we can write perfect English, right? So yeah.
You're working with some pretty big names who have experience with huge titles like Ni no Kuni and also Dragon Quest series or Final Fantasy.
Right. So
how did you find them?
Oh yeah, so their names first. Ollie Chance and Morgan Rushton. They are from a company called Schlock Limited in England, and the way I found them was we were looking actually for someone to help us with the scenario at some point after signing up with with HitSense, after we knew what kind of budget we had, and we ran into Link's agency, who are basically offering different writers for different games, from indie, from small projects to AAA projects, for various writing and scenario needs, basically. And Oli and Morgan were 2 of the candidates that they offered for help with our project. And we interviewed a few candidates and gave them some simple test tasks and so on. And Oli and Morgan were the ones we struck off with the best, and it was a really great collaboration through and through. I mean, it's still continuing because we're still working on the script.
Tell us a little bit about the game. So what is this game about? What are like the core features, the main things that you wanted to kind of implement? You mentioned that there are some games that you really liked. So what are the elements that you want to kind of like to reenact in your own title?
Right. So Shores Unknown is a fantasy tactical RPG in a low poly setting, where you play as a mercenary called Morton and his sister called Ren, who get stuck between a rock and a hard place, basically, between the Inquisitor armies who think they are outlaws and are trying to catch them and do bad things to them, and the unknown invaders from unknown lands. And the game was heavily inspired by a variety of RPGs that we all played in our childhood years. And for me specifically, a game called The Last Remnant, made by Square Enix, originally an Xbox 360 title, which was later ported to PC.
When you're saying that this is a game that was released during childhood years, I mean, I feel very old, because for me it was when I was writing for a magazine in Ukraine, like back in the day. But yeah, I remember that one. Okay, so yeah, continue.
Yeah, and The Last Remnant for me, I guess that one wasn't really childhood years for me. I was in the university back then. As for childhood years, I think I'm referring to like games like Baldur's Gate, stuff like that.
Yeah, Kirill, you don't worry, because Last Remnant was definitely childhood years for me. On the other hand, I did read the magazine you mentioned pretty religiously, so you have that going for
Yeah,
you.
they were very heavy on JRPGs back in the day. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Sorry for interrupting. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So, Last Remnant was a very important Japanese RPG for me because of how unique it felt, and I generally like the genre of Japanese RPGs, but I don't often find myself engaged with the combat system. With The Last Remnant was the opposite. I was super engrossed in the combat system, and I've never seen anything like that made before. Like that combination of tactical combat with indirect orders, union AI, and stuff like that. That was really unique, and that hasn't been actually done by anyone else afterwards. And it was kind of a big inspiration for me to try and kind of reverse engineer that combat, take it for my own unique spin, I guess. And that was the origin point, I guess, for Shores Unknown as well.
Yeah,
And
can you walk
go
us through the combat system that you mentioned? Because in all of your marketing materials, you're always saying that you have this innovative battle system. Personally, I'm not a huge tactical RPG guy. I did play some of them. I played a lot of XCOM, for example, and I realized that you don't have a grid. But like, what's different about the implementation of the battle system in Shores Unknown that differentiates it from all of the other games?
All right. So as you say, yeah, we don't have any grid, and we don't have any control over character movement in battle. So all the characters have their own AI. And what you do,
Oh,
so the combat is separated into order phase and action phase. Um, Order phase is where you give your characters the actual orders, do this ability on this target, for example, and you see a pretty classic timeline at the top of the screen. But unlike classic turn-based games, um, you don't, let's say, give a character an order and they instantly carry it out. Instead, you give all the characters in your party the orders, then you press ready, and they start acting based on their position in the timeline. And they move basically in accordance with what is happening in combat. So we have this mechanic called engagement. Each character has from 1 to 3 slots. Most characters start with 1 slot for engagement, and as you increase in power, you'll gain more slots. Bosses may have more slots as well, and so on. And engagement is basically, it's saying, like, if 2 characters are engaged, they are kind of locked with each other in melee combat, right? So they can retaliate to each other, and they will by default, like, if you engage a character that's trying to attack a different character, then their target will automatically switch to whoever is engaging them. And abilities like cleave, abilities like fireball, and so on, like the actions that are traditionally area of effect in most other games work based on engagement in our game. So, for example, you have a character that's engaged with 3 other characters. They cast cleave. They will deal damage to those 3 characters they engage. And then on top of that, when the character's engagement is full, anyone else trying to attack them in melee will automatically move to the side for a side attack. Or if enough characters are already attacking from a side, they will instead, try to attack from the rear, and so on. And they will deal additional damage. And they will also automatically position themselves on the battlefield, so you don't have to worry about that. But you also have to constantly be conscious of this engagement thing, of the slots,
Right.
of who's attacking.
You represent the engagement with this yellow line between characters on the screen, right?
Yeah. And there's also the like the little square icons at the bottom of the screen near the character portrait that also show that this character is engaging these targets, for example.
This sounds pretty streamlined and a bit, like you decided to eliminate all micromanagement from your game. I think that perhaps, and again, not like a huge hardcore tactics RPG guy myself, but I think that for some people it might be too streamlined. How do you strike the balance between simplicity and complexity in your game?
So yeah, there's I mean, definitely we've seen this feedback from some hardcore tactical RPG fans that they really want the grid and they really want to control the battle. We still say give the game a chance because there's a lot of mechanics and there's a lot of depth to it, and it's just completely different. But that doesn't mean it's really less tactical. And especially as you get more characters, as you get more abilities unlocked, you start getting the synergies, the combos between the characters. So you say you want to, I don't know, delay this enemy's action so that it doesn't kill your healer, so that the healer gets off a heal on someone else, and so on and so forth. And it's about, I guess it's more strategic than tactical, maybe, in the meaning that you need, as a battlefield commander, you need to focus on the global situation rather than telling everyone specifically what to do.
Yeah, when
There's
you were describing the system, it kind of reminded me a little bit of the like Final Fantasy 12, I think, where you had a lot of you had a party and you can actually sort of like program the activities that they did during the battle, so you didn't actually have to participate that much. It's first of all, it was very complicated. I don't remember, but I remember when I was playing, it was very challenging for me. So I didn't like lack, in terms of challenge for sure. But on the other hand, it also speeds up the combat. So in many cases, people who are starting with like JRPGs in particular, they are taken aback by the amount of time that you have to wait, right? So not everybody likes to use like auto turn, and they feel like especially in the beginning, the battles seem very repetitive. They're all the same, they're not that engaging. And I guess what you're kind of providing is a different take on this formula. You basically taking it into the other direction. So I think people who like more strategic outlook, yes, like you said, I think they would be more engaged in this kind of like battle system and the way to approach like challenges in the game. But let me ask the other question. So apart from like the battle system, which is great, obviously, as you explained, what are the other activities that the player can engage in the game? So are there quests? Are there, I don't know, like any romantic lines that you can pursue, or is there a lot of exploration? Like, what else can you do in the game?
Okay, yeah, it's so let's start with the romantic lines. No, there is no romance. We decided not to focus on that part. There are other games do that great, so yeah, let them do it. We decided to focus on what we do best, and that's, I think, combat and exploration. But yeah, other than that, it's a fully fledged RPG. You have the exploration, you have main quests, we have a pretty involved storyline actually. That in the final game we're planning to have spanning about 20 to 30 hours. So it's a pretty lengthy one. And then we have all the side quests and so on, which we're also working on adding right now as we're in the early access right now. And yeah, since we're mentioning early access, I'll also add that right now the game has about 6 to 7 hours of gameplay worth in it. And as we will move forward, we're planning to stay in early access for about a year. So right now we only have about 1.5 half, 1.5 chapters in the game out of 4 planned chapters of the story. So it's going to expand quite a bit as we proceed through early access.
From a development standpoint, there is the story that repeats itself. Like I think every year there is like a small studio that wants to build like an ambitious project, and a lot of those studios actually fail because they don't really have the ability to cope with the whole scope of the project. So how are you approaching this situation? How are you fixing this? And what are the maybe modern tools or technologies or services that allow you to build these big games, which 20 hours for like an RPG, it's pretty lengthy, as you said. How do you manage to build it like step by step? How do you manage to test everything to make sure that everything is actually working? Because I understand outsourcing 3D, maybe music, maybe localization, but you still need to do the coding, you still need to do the testing. play testing as well. There is a lot of work. So how do you manage to kind of keep everything afloat?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, as I said, the game is made in Unreal Engine 4, and I'm the only programmer on it. I'm both the game designer and the programmer. And initially, I was doing it.
I figured from the number of people that you mentioned that you're the only programmer, which is kind of like surprising, but at the same time great because you managed to do all of it.
Thank you. So yeah, the good thing is, I guess I'll mention that like the vast majority of game mechanics and systems is already fully implemented and tested. And in that regard, in early access, you can test the game out. That's how it is. We will, of course, there's still bugs that we're fixing. We're adding more content. We are probably changing some mechanics, maybe in accordance with the player feedback, and adding some new ones. But the core foundation of the game is implemented and it's working. So that's the good thing. And the content of the game, like the main story, is actually about 80% complete in the internal builds right now. We just cut off a lot of that content for the early access build because it's not fully tuned yet. It's not fully balanced, and we're still working on improving that. Where, as I said, like we have the main story in place, but we're still working on adding like more side content to flesh it all out. Yeah, but we have the full story script ready as well. How do we test it? Okay, that's a good question. We've been involving our players from the very beginning. As I talked earlier, we released the very first prototype very early on. And since then, we had a few players who were like really interested in the game, who are on our Discord server, and they offered to test the game for us for free. We also have some internal testers on the team, but with a game of such a scope, that's usually not enough. We also, like, since the team is so small, but everyone is handling many roles, multiple roles. Like all of us are kind of testers as well, in addition to whatever else we're doing.
You mentioned that the game is very big, and you also mentioned before we started the recording that there are over 400 characters there. So probably there are some tools that you're building to, make the generation possible. Are you using Houdini? Are you using some custom blueprints in Unreal Engine that allow you to build like a countless number? Are you using like Reallusion tools for character production? Like, what are the interesting tools that kind of help you populate this world that you're building?
Okay, we're actually using a pretty simple pipeline. So just a little historical X-course, I guess. Initially, when the game was in its very early stage, we started with marketplace assets like the Cinti Polygon assets, which you're probably familiar with, and they're everywhere in indie games nowadays. And that was the problem for us. So we really liked how they looked, the overall feel and style of it, but we didn't like that our game looked like every other game out there. So at some point, after we established the budget, we decided that we wanted to replace a lot of those assets, especially the hero assets, like the big buildings, the characters, of course, and so on, with our own custom ones. And we came up with a pretty simple solution. We use Blender 3D, which is free and which is very nice, to model our own characters. We use a plugin called AutoRig Pro to rig them, and that allows immediate compatibility with Unreal Engine 4 when we import them. So they're all standard. They use the standard mannequin, the standard Unreal Engine 4 humanoid skeleton for all the animations, and that also allows us to come up with affordable animations, because then we can use lots of marketplace available animations to fit our characters. And like I didn't mention it, but we don't actually have a dedicated animator on the team. We worked with some outsourcers to come up with like specific story animations. Our intro, for example, is made by an outsourcer in the game. But for most animations and combat and so on, we actually use marketplace animations, and those work pretty well for us because like we customize them when we need to better fit the models and the content. And actually, like having to author all the animations is close to impossible on this scale for an indie studio because animations are very pricey, and especially at the level of quality that we want to achieve, where we want to have like eight directional movement and so on, and like unique animations for each ability, and we already have more than 100 abilities in the game.
Right. So you don't have an animator, you only have one programmer, but you do have 3 writers, which is like kind of interesting for an indie game studio of your size.
Right, we have three writers, and we have I think. Well, let me check really quickly. I have credits open over here. Right, so we have 6 people helping on the modeling side, actually.
Right.
One of whom is my wife, who made the vast majority of human characters in the game, actually. So yeah, that the 3D asset bit of the production is probably like the biggest for us. But since the game is really story heavy, like we're already close to 100,000 words in the script, that obviously required a heavy narrative side of the team to help.
Yeah.
And as for programming, yeah, I guess I mean I really have to thank Unreal Engine 4 and Epic for making such a robust, easy to use tool, because that really enabled me to kind of make all of those things myself. And really, we don't even use many marketplace based plugins. We use a save system, I think, and a couple of editor only tools to just help us with the workflow, but most actual systems in the game I developed myself.
Yeah,
So
it just goes to say that Unreal is a very powerful tool right now. Right
yeah,
before, I think like even like 10 years before, it was impossible to imagine something like this when a tiny team basically built a big RPG, which is like 20 hours long, and it has like a bunch of characters and a clever combat system and animations and all those things, because you have to have a lot of people to kind of fill all those blanks in a game project, and
absolutely.
you're approaching it in a very nice and flexible way, in where you're combining your own assets and you're using animations and other little bits and pieces you can download from marketplace and just use them. I think it's a great approach. But Stepan, I have a question for you. So could you tell about the role that Indie Cup kind of plays in this story? Where do you guys help? How do you work with the publishers and the developers? Like, where do you stand in this, development?
Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, we kind of provide a way for independent studios to showcase their work to potential partners, games media, and streamers. So twice a year, we invite emerging teams from countries like Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, and more to introduce their upcoming games to a panel of independent jury, including people from big games industry companies, critics, streamers. Shores Unknown participated in the Best Unreal Engine Game category, and this independent jury selected it as the winner of this category. So right now, our badge is at the top of the Steam page, which is really kind of nice to see each time I open the Shores Unknown Steam page. I think that, and Ilya is probably the person that will talk about how IndieCap helped him and the team to make the game better and improve it. But I think that IndieCap is a great way for teams of this size to kind of estimate the quality of their game, to get feedback from professional industry professionals, people who have a lot of experience. So, for example, in the Best Unreal Engine category, we have a jury from Epic Games. We have people who have dozens of years of experience working with this technology. They're providing feedback to developers on how their game is built with Unreal Engine. I think it's a great way for teams to understand where their game is at this particular moment.
I guess my side of story is that yes, Indie Cup reward is probably the most prestigious one we have right now, and we're really happy to receive it. Like the best Unreal Engine 4 game, wow! And we were competing with some really strong titles as well. We did not expect it, and we were very, very happy, like literally screaming happy in the team when we got that. As to how specifically it helped, it obviously helped with the visibility. It also gave us a huge morale boost. The actual reward we won, I think it was a GeForce 2070 back then, which definitely helped us beef up the development PC for Unreal Engine 4, because Unreal Engine 4 is a pretty heavy engine on the system. Of course, all the connections. Since we won, we continued talking with the guys in Indie Cup, and they helped with a lot of connections and so on. So yeah, it was really helpful. As an indie, I guess it's always it's always in your head the question whether you're making the right game, whether your game is interesting enough, and events like Indie Cup, well, they provide an answer basically.
So I do have one more question though, and I think a lot of people who are gonna watch this, they're gonna ask it. So how does it work when you're living in Japan, you're working in a game development company there, and you still have time to build your own game? Like,
Okay.
where do you find the time? How does it kind of connect with the work ethic in Japan? Is it different? Do they give you extra time, extra hours to work on your own, or how do you find this balance?
Well, the quick question is I didn't really find a balance. I had to quit my job, my full-time job at the time, to focus full-time on my project, because it probably wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Can you talk a bit more about this particular decision? Because this is what I was interested in from the very beginning when I heard about you and Shores Unknown, is that you moved to Japan in 2016 or 17, if I remember correctly.
Right. Yep.
And then you started working at this company called Q Games, and then you quit in just like under a year after that to focus on your first debut independent title, a very ambitious title, while still working in Japan and also starting a family. So what was your experience doing that?
Okay, that's a lot. Let me try and unpack that. So actually, it was almost exactly 2 years after I joined Q Games that I decided to leave. So I started prototyping in 2017, but it was only around summer 2018 when I decided to take a leap of faith and take the publisher contract, basically. And it's not that different in Japan in regards to work ethic and so on, and that usually you sign a non-compete agreement. And so if I wanted to focus on my indie project full time and actually make it a commercial thing, I would be breaking the non-compete agreement with my current company. So yeah, that was one reason why I decided to quit in the first place. And the other is so Q Games, as an indie company, it's an incubator of sorts. So there's just a lot of people who are ex Q Games who are then focusing on an indie project of their own, because the way the company is just it's very much about creativity and about trying to do something on your own. And then at some point you just have to make the choice. Do I continue working within this team, or do I try to make something on my own?
Right. Well, a kind of connected question that I also wanted to ask is that, like Kirill mentioned, you're a small team creating a very ambitious game, you're doing it for 4 years already. You're planning to stay in early access for another year at the very least. How do you manage to not burn out? Because it's kind of hard to be the only programmer in the team working on an ambitious game, living in a country that is not your homeland, and this is your first game too.
Okay. Well, the easy answer is I don't. I had a couple of burnouts when I just took a break for a month or two. I always come back, I guess, and that's the magical thing is that I like this game so much, and I have such a strong support base from all these people who are interested in it that I always come back.
Yeah, how do you manage to come back? I mean, a lot of people participate in IndieCup. They're like people working independently, whether part-time or full-time in very small teams, and they're working on their first like dream game. How do you manage to come back each time you burn out?
Well, I mean it's a combination of my trust and belief in this game. Like I really feel that we have something special in our hands, and especially now that it's finally released in early access, and we see the reviews come in, the actual feedback from players buying this game, and I'm really just grateful for all those people and for their trust. It feels like we are on the right path with this project. And then the other is, I guess, my professional experience. I just what working on a game title is like. So this isn't actually my first released game, just the first released game as an indie developer. So I know what releasing a game is like, what it is like to support a game which is already like in live ops and so on. And I guess I know some of the techniques of keeping myself afloat during the turmoil. Hey, go ahead.
Yeah, I really hope that you're not gonna have any problems with the burn down, and you're gonna be able to finish and everything. Could you maybe give us a little bit of a glimpse into the future and tell what are the kind of the next things that you're gonna work on, and when do we actually be able to play the title?
Right. So first of all, yeah, the title is already playable. As I said, it's in early access. We simultaneously launched it on Steam, Good Old Games, and Utomic. Those three platforms. We're going to stay in early access for about a year, maybe a little bit more, depending on how things align, depending on player feedback. So right now, it has the first chapter and the first half of the second chapter out of 4 chapters planned for the game, for the story. We'll be releasing the first patch that will focus on the player feedback, adjusting the difficulty and so on, early next week.
I noticed a lot of reviews complaining about the difficulty curve in your game.
Oh yeah, it is.
I think somebody mentioned that it's like a Dark Souls of tactical RPGs.
Yeah, that's the feedback I particularly love, I guess. So yeah, we're happy to be compared to Dark Souls because Dark Souls is a very important game series for me as well. So we jumped the shark a little bit with the tuning. So what happened is we had a working balance in all the demos that we released earlier, and there was some feedback that it felt a bit too easy. And then there were there was the later content that was being tuned while the demos were being released. And as part of that tuning, our game designer decided to also revisit the earlier content. And what happened is we sort of we rushed it through a bit. We tested it, but we didn't test it enough. And when you're making a game for 4 years, you have this developer fatigue. You don't really understand how a new player will interact with your game. So
it's just what I wanted to say. I mean, when you're building the game, it just seems so easy for you because you're all you do is basically play it. And when you give it to someone else, everybody's like, "What am I even supposed to do?"
Exactly. Yeah. And I'll be honest. I mean, after playing this game for so long, like before the rebalance, just testing the build and playing some of those battles for I don't know hundreds of times, playing it for the umpteenth time, I was falling asleep. And then the rebalance came. It came to the internal build. I tried it, and I was, this is good. Let's push it. So it did. And then the first thing, like we released the game. I pour myself a glass of beer. We start watching the Twitch streams. And the first thing I know is the people get to the early fight about 30 minutes into the game, and they can't beat it. No matter what they do, they just get completely obliterated. So I figured that the beer was a bit too early. And we decide to just quickly hotfix it. We released the hotfix after about an hour after releasing it. That fixed the balance a little bit, made it fairer. But there's still some outliers remaining that we want to fix, and we will push that patch, early next week. After that, we'll focus on content updates. We're hoping to push the next story content update in the next few 2 to 3 months. And we'll probably have another big update, adding some new contracts, like basically those are purely battle-focused quests that don't have any story to them, but just to give the players something to sink their teeth in, because we have a number of players who are already done with all the battles in the game and all the story content. So despite it being hard, some players are actually tackling it quite nicely.
That's always the case.
Well,
some players are very good at the game, while others are being like can't finish the first fight.
Definitely. And I mean, I agree that it definitely has a steep learning curve because of how the combat is so unique. I mean, if you haven't played Last Remnant, you haven't played a combat like this before, most likely. And it just introduces a number of concepts that we realize that we need to do a better job at explaining. So we'll also be revisiting the tutorials, probably adding an encyclopedia of sorts that just provides some more in-depth information on all the combat mechanics for the players who care about that stuff. Because we don't want to, in one of the earlier, like in one of the first prototypes, actually we had those really big, like a page-long tutorial screens which tried to explain every mechanic in the game as it appeared, and the players were just completely what mind blown. What is going on? Do I have to read all of it to understand the game? So yeah, it's a hard balance.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was very inspiring to hear about your story and your game. I really hope that everything's gonna work out and no more hot fixes. That everything's gonna work flawlessly from this point after this interview. Thank you so much for joining, guys. We'll add the links in the description to the video to where you can download and play the game, and our partners and everyone else. So you can go out and check out the links and play the game for yourself and see how it works. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Yeah, and please use
by the way,
links in the description.
You're very much invited to participate. Maybe, win a prize in some different category this time.
Thank you. Actually, are we allowed to with a game that's already released?
So we do accept games in early access, but the best in real engine category, since you already is close to.
Cool. Yeah, we'll definitely apply.
Thank
you.
Right. Good. Thank you.
Awesome.
See you guys. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You have much to learn.
Well, fancy that.
How can I help you?
I have awaited your coming, visitors not of this shore.
Thanks for enjoying another episode of the 80 Level Roundtable podcast. Check out upcoming episodes on the 80 Level website at 80.lv. Join our career site at 80.lv/RFP. And share our podcast with friends and on your social networks.